We're here with Rashid Kotwal of Revealed Resources today. And I have to say, my key takeaway from our discussion is to learn to shut up. Essentially, leveraging the power of silence is one of the strongest ways that we can help prospects work through their own objections, and how we can really get in trouble when we jump in with a well-rehearsed response right off the bat. And Rashid actually shares how he got burned in an interview doing that very thing. He shares with us how can we preempt objections so they're not coming up from the prospect late in the sales process, but we're building them in actually up front. And very important, how do we manage our emotional triggers that go off in us as we hear objections that we need to deal with? One of my favorite pieces of advice is how to make sure that your prospect does not feel steamrolled through your sales process. Rashid has great expertise in NLP, psychology, consulting, and of course, longtime sales experience himself. So let's dive in and learn from Rashid.
People, my thing is, if you're getting objections, you haven't done your job right.
Okay.
In the first place. Okay? Because people object because they're uncertain about something, they're unsure about something, they have questions. And if you look at the stereotypical salesperson, and if we go to the extreme of the used car salesperson of maybe 15, 20 years ago, where people would just steamroll over you. And it was, I am going to sell you this thing, and you are going to be buying this thing whether you want it or not. And of course, the buyer's remorse kicks in later. Mm-hmm. And if we turn that on its head and say that you can't actually sell anything to anybody. People want to buy things from you. Your job is to be able to figure out what is valuable to them and put that proposition to them and show them the value and demonstrate the value in such a way that they don't object.
Okay.
Now, there are always going to be, situations where you're going to come up against somebody who doesn't have the money and, doesn't have the authority. But then if you've gone pretty far down the track without figuring that out, you haven't done your job either.
Okay. So that's part of your qualifying.
This is all a part of the qualifying, going down the track. So when it comes to objections, my thing is you need to be, in NLP, what we call uptime and downtime. So uptime is I'm focused on you and what's happening externally. Okay. Downtime is I've got the voice going on in my head and I'm thinking, Mary's just said this, and while you're talking, I'm already thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say that's going to be really clever. Okay? Mm-hmm. And what happens there, the minute you're downtime, is you're missing whatever's going on out there.
Okay.
You're missing the sensory cues that we're all giving off constantly as to what's going on. So while you're blathering on as the salesperson, the other person is twitching or looking a bit hesitant or whatever, and you completely miss it, and you go to the next point, to the next point, to the next point. But what happens is they're way back there. Right. They're still thinking about what you said there, and they have completely missed everything else.
Okay.
So my first thing with people would be become really good at sensory observation.
Okay.
Observe the other person and be uptime. That means completely focused outwards on them, not thinking about the next thing that you have to say for the next objection that they're going to come up with.
Okay.
So when you want to?
Well, I was just thinking, I loved your comment about if you're getting objections, you missed something in your sales flow that needed to be addressed. And when I think of common objections like the financial, or the timing isn't right, or I'm looking at your competitors and they seem like a better deal, that those should be coming out in your sales conversation, not at the end of the sales call. Yeah.
So one of the things that I say is, look, we all, if you've been doing this long enough, whatever you're selling long enough, you are going to get you're going to hear every objection there is. And there are only going to be a set finite number of them. If you've got more than 10 or 15, there's something wrong.
Right.
And you're going to hear them time and time again. Now, here's the caveat. Just because you've heard them time and time again does not mean you have to jump in with an answer. Okay, so if I go back to my last corporate job, which was, when I got the job, it would have been 17, 18 years ago. And I was there for a couple of years. And I was there taking over as a senior executive to sort an organization out. And one of the pieces of feedback I got from the interview process was that I came across as too glib. And I was a little bit surprised, and I said, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, we asked you a question and you immediately came up with an answer. It was like you heard it all before and that was the answer.
Yeah.
Okay? And that came across as I was not listening to them.
Oh, okay.
I still got the job, interestingly enough.
Okay.
So that is a major trap that we can fall into, because we hear the same thing again and again and again and again. Oh yeah, that's objection number 5. Yeah, I'll answer it.
Okay.
So the thing to do is to treat every prospect with the respect that they deserve. Mm-hmm. You want to be treated with respect, treat them with respect. And say, okay, that's a really good question. Let me answer it this way. And also think to yourself, okay, what must have been going on in that prospect's mind for them to ask the question in the first place?
Right, kind of back to your sensory perception. It's not just the words that came out of their mouth that you go to your script and say, that's objection number 6. This is how I respond. It's all the message they're sending you that you need to respond to.
Yeah, so I might ask the question, let's say, whatever the objection is, I might be thinking, okay, I might ask them, why? That's really interesting. So why is that a problem for you? Or why did you ask that? What was behind it? If we start thinking of layers of onions, you're really trying to peel, because the first objection is usually never the real objection. There's always something deeper, and it's up to you to keep peeling those onion layers off until you figure out what the real problem is. And the real problem could be anything. It could be, maybe they don't like you, they don't trust you or whatever, and they're coming up with any reason at all to object. Who knows, okay? Because ultimately, all other things being equal, we like doing business with people we know, like, and trust, but we like to like them. Mm-hmm. There's no other option. We're not going to do business with them.
Right.
So the thing is to always figure out what is behind this objection. And then as you're moving through the sales process, think of a series of canal locks, in Europe, as you're going up the canal, they pump the water up, they close the canal doors so the water doesn't flow down, the ship stays at that point. Yeah. Think of a sales process in the same vein. Okay. You're going from point A to point Z, where hopefully you're going to get the business, and hopefully they're going to stay as a client for many years to come, because that's where the real money is. So you've got to close each door off as you go. So you say something and you want to get agreement. Do they understand this at the time? Do they have any questions? Was there any sort of flicker of shadow of doubt? Did they pause? And and something else that I always teach people is the power of silence. I know I'm doing all the talking here, but that's a different situation. But the power of silence is incredibly important, and it's incredibly powerful. Okay? So if you ask a question to your prospect, shut up, bite your tongue till it bleeds, as they used to say to me in the Amway business, and wait for them to respond. What normally happens with people is that you ask a question, they don't respond, and you feel, oh God, we're really not comfortable with silence as a society, generally speaking.
Right.
Think of your dinner party. There's a lull in conversation, and you're thinking, should I say something? Should I break into, especially if you're the host or the hostess.
Or on phone sales.
Or on phone sales, exactly.
Yeah, silence is uncomfortable enough in person, but when you're sitting there not seeing anyone, you wonder, are they still there?
Well, I remember I learned this lesson, and this is going back, almost 40 years. I had a boss who was an ex-IBM salesman, and one day he said, "Listen, when I ask a question, I just shut up and wait for the answer, and I wait and I wait and I wait and I wait." And a year later, I basically did it back to him, and we waited for a long time before he had to give in. But I said to somebody, the longest I've ever waited is half an hour.
Oh my goodness.
We have sat there for half an hour in silence. And I just look at them and I smile and I look at them and wait.
And then what?
And then they respond.
Oh my goodness. Now that's patience and confidence.
It's the old thing. He who speaks first loses. You've given them something to think about. The last thing you want to do is to interrupt that thought process.
Okay.
Now, if we come back to sensory acuity, one of the cues that you look for is what is happening with their eyes. If they're, you notice, if you're looking at somebody who's thinking, their eyes will go up, they'll go side to side, they'll go down, which means they're doing some form of transderivational search. Now, that's a bit of jargon there, okay? What it effectively means is that they're searching for some memory, or they're creating some memory, and that's an internal process that they're going through.
Okay.
You want to leave them to it.
Right.
Let them finish it. Don't jump in with an interruption. No. So give people the time to think, come up with an answer, be considered, and you will get a lot further. So those are the things around sensory acuity.
Okay. That's such a precise skill that you really do need to be comfortable in your own skin to master. But truly, to manage objections well, that really is a key skill.
Yeah, but you think about it. You think about a phone conversation. A phone conversation is I talk, you talk. I talk, you talk. Generally speaking, okay. So let's say I've made a statement or I've asked a question. Then wouldn't I normally wait for you to respond? And just because you're taking a millisecond longer to respond doesn't mean that I have to jump in with the next thing or give you the answer.
Right. Right. And if your prospect is the one coming up with the answers, then you know that it's meaningful to them instead of handing it to them.
Yeah. And they have to come up with whatever they come up with. In a sales situation, we say that we control the structure, as in we control the way the questions are asked and the way the whole conversation goes. They control the content of what they're going to tell us. The other thing that I say to people is be very cognizant of what's in it for me. And the what's in it for me in an organization, and there's an irony here, okay? And it's quite logical when you think about it. In a small organization, so there are two of us who run consultancy, my wife and myself. What's in our interest is in the organization's interest. What's good for me is good for the organization. That's where our bread and butter comes from.
Right.
But the bigger the organization, the self-interest of the person you're dealing with could diverge massively from the self-interest of the organization. So what's good for the person may not be good for the organization, and vice versa. And I heard this a few years ago from somebody talking about this, and the example he gave is quite a good one. He said, look, they were a facilities management company, so they went in and outsourced, facilities. And they were getting blocked by the facilities manager of this particular organization they were trying to sell to. And they just could not get past this guy. Until one day somebody said to them on the grapevine that, look, he's afraid he's going to lose his job. You come in, what's going to happen to him?
Okay.
It's logical, isn't it?
Yep.
Why is he going to say, okay, major objection? So what they did was very clever. They went to him on the quiet and they said, let's call him Fred. Fred, we are expanding in the state and we are looking for a state manager to run our whole operation, manage all of these facilities, and we thought you would be the ideal candidate. Guess what he did? He left the organization, went to these people. Well, first of all, he okayed these people taking over. These people gave him the job.
Yeah.
Everyone is happy. So even though it was in the organization's best interest to have these people come in and manage the facility, in his personal interest, it wasn't. Right. So if you can't figure that out, and sometimes it's not easy to figure that out, but you've got to start thinking, okay, what is really going on with this person? Why could they be objecting to this? It seems like a perfectly good deal. Mm-hmm. Logically, it makes sense. But where is the emotional component?
Exactly. Yeah, the personal agenda can override the business agenda,
absolutely.
Certainly.
And because he's just an employee, his personal agenda doesn't match the organization's agenda. It's a very subtle but very important thing to be aware of.
Yeah. Well, and sales reps, I think, face that dilemma when it comes to discounting. Because if they're incented on the top line, getting a deal at any cost is in their best interest, but not in their company's best interest. So Yeah, even sales reps live with that personal dilemma.
Yeah, yeah, and to me, discounting is, and I've written about this extensively. Discounting is one of the biggest evils. You train people to want a discount. Instead, you should be training people to want your value.
Exactly.
And if you can differentiate your value in such a way that there is no apples to apples comparison, then people will pay within reason. People will pay whatever it is you want.
Exactly. Yeah, discounting is the fastest way to kill trust, because you're always left wondering, did I get the best deal? Could I have asked for more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And then what happens if you just sold it at price X, but then they find out that the next person down the line got it at price X minus whatever?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even if it hasn't happened, you're sure it must have happened somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. So we never discount, okay? Never, ever, ever, ever discount. We will say, okay, you don't want to pay that? Fine. What should we take away?
Right.
Oh, but I want all of it. Well, sorry.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. And if they're not willing to come to the party, I'm not willing to work with them, because at the end of the day, we work with people for 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. I want to know that I like them.
Right.
I want to know that they're going to do what I tell them to do.
And that they'll always have your best interest in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a two-way street. So one of the other things, let's just come back to objections for a second, is to preempt the objection. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways to do that is, if you know that you get certain objections at certain points of the sales process flow, talk about it then. Say, and you can use stories. One of the most powerful things that human beings, human ways of actually persuasion is through stories. And so you tell a story about a client who had the same problem, the same objection or whatever. And you just talk about the fact that, look, some people have at this point been thinking about this, and this was something they came up with, and this is why this doesn't happen. And they're going, oh, okay, I was thinking that, but I didn't voice it. Because very often objections aren't voiced. They're thinking this stuff.
Yeah.
They're looking at you, they're smiling, and you think you're doing really well.
Right.
And at the end of it, they say, thank you very much.
I'll think about it.
Or of course, the other one is they could be using you just to, to compare against somebody else, which is another story entirely. And that can be quite difficult to get around.
So, Rashid, you are so skilled at this, so this could be a challenge for you. I think what a lot of sales professionals face is the emotional triggers that go off for them when an objection comes up. Mm-hmm. And it's like feeling rejected. And you've worked that out of your sales process because you've worked dealing with the objections proactively into your process. But if somebody isn't that savvy, or they get caught off guard with something that they didn't anticipate, the emotional triggers fire. So can you remember how you trained yourself out of those triggers?
Look, I'll be frank. We all get the triggers, and I still do. Okay? We all do. We're human beings. We're emotional. And when you hear something and you go, you've got this internal thing, and it can be really quite easy to, almost, lash out metaphorically in a way, or you think of, But I think if you just stop, pause, maybe count to 10 internally.
Yeah.
Okay. It's that Stephen. There was a Stephen Covey saying, between the stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space, I'm paraphrasing it. In that space is the power to choose.
Right. Exactly.
So you say something. I have this immediate emotional trigger. Stop. Take stock. Take a deep breath. Count to 10. Maybe even disassociate. So disassociate means you imagine yourself out there somewhere, looking at yourself, looking at them. Mm-hmm. Metaphorically, you can sort of imagine it. It's an NLP technique, and just go, okay, why would they be asking this? And if you ask it with a real intent, and ask yourself, you don't have to ask them, but ask yourself with a real curiosity intent behind it. rather than I'm being attacked by this person.
And letting it trigger your fight or flight.
Yeah.
Really smart.
I mean, I think the fight or flight, or even freeze, because we generally freeze first and then decide whether we're going to fight or fly. I don't think you can actually stop that process entirely, because that's triggered very deep down in your amygdala, if I remember right. So, but the point is, how do you respond once that trigger takes place, and how do you stop the trigger affecting you? So you basically want to go from the fight-flight response to the frontal cortex of your brain, where the rational part of your brain takes over, and you can say, okay, hang on, let me have a rational conversation about this. But I don't think you can ever really get away with it entirely. It's how you respond afterwards that counts.
So my wrap-up question for you, we may have just answered, but I want to give you the chance to add anything to it that you may want to. What is one of the most important things that you want our audience to take away that will help them immediately be more effective with objection management?
I would say that the simplest thing is, as you go through your sales process and you explain something to somebody, ask them whether it made sense to them. Okay? So at each stage when you're going through something, just stop, take stock. Did it make sense? Do you have any questions? Any concerns? Do I need to explain something else? Because what happens is that we're so used to doing whatever we're doing, and we tend to do it day in and day out, is that we do become glib at it, and we do sort of steamroll people. Whereas we have to understand that they've never been in that situation. We have to, in a way, we have to teach them how to buy, which I know sounds a bit odd in a way, but we have to teach them that, okay, it is okay to ask questions, and it is okay, and this is the process. If you teach people that, okay, this is the process we're going to be going through to make sure that we actually get you a solution that's going to give you the result that you want.
Yeah.
Rather than just steamrolling some process and, you as the prospect sit there going, what was all that about?
Yes, and making it a two-way dialogue, which involves the prospect in the process instead of them just being kind of lectured at.
Yeah, the prospect. Okay, so the one other thing I would say is that always, always, always remember, people buy, you cannot sell. Right. They have to want to buy from you. And that's that process of showing them value, generating that trust factor, finding out what it is that their ultimate outcome is, and showing them in no uncertain terms how you can help them get there.
Yeah, and that overrides objections through that process then.
Yeah, if you do that well, there shouldn't be any major objection. There will always be questions, there will always be explanations, but I would rather look at them as questions rather than objections.
Right.
And because if it's a question, yes, I haven't explained something correctly, maybe they haven't seen the value, maybe I haven't elicited the value. So, in the next 10 seconds, if I can say the one thing I will always say to somebody when I start a meeting is, why are we here? My first question, why are we here? Oh, but you arranged the meeting. Yeah, I did, but you accepted it. So why are we here?
And I know you value your time, so why did you let me in? Yeah, that's beautiful.
And then say, okay, so if there's one thing that I could, that you could get out of all of this that would give you the greatest return on any time, money, effort you expended on it, what would it be? And they'll tell you. Why is that important? They'll tell you. If you keep asking the why question, ultimately what's that going to get you? And you're looking for an emotional trigger as to what they want emotionally, which you can then look at the logical reasons behind it, because we all buy an emotion and we all justify by logic, and I don't care who you are. Okay?
Perfect sense.
And when you're selling to a corporation, you're selling to a person. That's the other thing. You're not selling to a company, you're selling to a human being.
Exactly. Yeah, so work through those personal agendas.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Rashid, for sharing your wisdom and extensive experience with us. This is so helpful and really makes me feel like, wow, anybody can really manage objections effectively by just making that their sales call.
Absolutely. Be human.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Don't you just feel smarter already? I tell you, with all of the interviews that I've done for Sales Mastery, most days I feel like I can conquer the world. If you want to make sure to catch all of our interviews with chief sales officers, experts, top sales producers, connect with us on our YouTube channel right here. And if you want access to all of the resources that we have for you at Sales Mastery, you can connect with us right here. Our goal is to make it fun and to make it simple for you to stay on the leading edge of selling. So connect with Sales Mastery for the smart way for you to become your best.